We are starting this video with a discussion of some of the causes of aggression. And so my first question for you is there, or how am I going to phrase this? Does alcohol, well, I'm going to ask two questions actually. That's how I'm going to do this. First question, is there a correlation between alcohol consumption and aggression levels? Next question, what is the correlation if there is one? We'll phrase that differently. Does alcohol cause aggression? Okay, yes, there is a correlation. There's a correlation between drinking and aggression. When people drink enough to be legally drunk, they are more likely to respond violently to provocations than people who have not had alcohol. But no, alcohol does not cause the aggression. What does alcohol do? Alcohol is a disinhibitor. Alcohol reduces social inhibitions. It makes you less cautious, more impulsive. It doesn't actually cause you to be aggressive. It disrupts the way that you process information. So you focus on and thus respond to the earliest, the most obvious aspects of a social situation, and you miss the subtleties. So you notice the guy that steps on your foot, you don't care about how someone had pushed into him and he unintentionally stepped on your foot. So for an experiment done by Davis and Loftus, they found that men who were drunk were less likely to interpret non-consent messages accurately. So they didn't pick up the subtlety of a woman saying, "No, stop hitting on me." And women who were drunk were less emphatic in their signs of refusal. So they didn't pick up on the guy hitting on them as much, and so they weren't as extreme in saying back off. So this can lead to problems. Another factor is the think-drink effect. That's when people expect alcohol to have certain effects on them. It often does. In an experiment with this, there were 3 groups. One group got non-alcoholic drinks. One group got drinks that got them to a moderate blood alcohol level. And then a third of the participants consumed drinks that got them to a high blood alcohol level. Now, within each of these 3 groups, there was another division. Within each group, the researchers manipulated the drinkers' expectations about how much alcohol they had consumed. So some people in the no alcohol group thought that they had high alcohol drinks or moderate alcohol drinks. Some knew it was no alcohol. Same thing for the people in the moderate group. Some thought they had no alcohol. Some thought they had a lot of alcohol. Some thought accurately that it was moderate, and same with the high alcohol group. So it was really like 9 groups instead of just the 3. It's what is your actual blood alcohol level? What is your assumption, expectation about your blood alcohol level? And then after that, they consumed their drinks. A Confederate insulted them. The quantity of alcohol they consumed was not as related to their aggressive behavior as their expectation about how much alcohol they had consumed. The more alcohol they believed they had in their system, the more aggressively they behaved towards the Confederate. It wasn't how drunk they actually were, it's how drunk they thought they were. So in all 3 groups, the no alcohol, moderate alcohol, and a high alcohol group, the people who thought they had high alcohol were the most aggressive. It wasn't just the people who actually had more alcohol in their system. For Taylor's experiment, people were given either low or high doses of alcohol. Then a Confederate made them angry. There was also a control group that got the alcohol, but a Confederate didn't make them angry. After that, all the participants, control and the experimental group, could shock the Confederate. The people who got the large dose of alcohol gave stronger shocks. The larger control group didn't give stronger shocks. So the drunk control group people who had not been insulted did not give stronger shocks. It was only the drunk experimental people who had been insulted who gave the stronger shocks. So alcohol didn't cause unprovoked aggression. It just heightened it in the participants who were provoked. The final question related to this for you. What about with marijuana? When they did this study but used large doses of THC, what was the connection between THC levels and aggression? Did participants get more or less aggressive than those who got a small dose of THC or no THC? The large dose provoked people were less aggressive than the people who got the large dose of alcohol and were provoked, or the low dose of THC and provoked. They were also less aggressive than participants in the control group who didn't get any drugs at all. So THC has the opposite effect of alcohol. It makes you less aggressive. It does not connect with higher aggression levels. The next cause of aggression: pain, discomfort, hunger. So first question for you, is hangry an actual thing? Yes. Bushman did an experiment where he had 107 married couples, and every night they would measure their blood sugar levels, and then they would put pins in a doll to show how angry they were at their spouse. There was a correlation between low blood sugar, which means you're hungry, and having more pins. So a negative correlation: low blood sugar, more pins. So low blood sugar also correlated with blasting their spouses with an annoying sound after a computer game. Yes, hangry is actually a thing. Pain, discomfort also connect. Berkowitz, which is spelled like this, did an experiment where people had to put their hand in ice water, which gets really painful fast. And if they had to do that, they had a sharp increase in committing aggressive acts against other students. If you are in pain, you are going to be more aggressive. Another factor connected with this is heat. It makes you uncomfortable. Heat and global warming. So Carl Smith and Craig found that riots were more likely to occur during hot days than during cold days. And Griffith and Veitch found that students who took a test in a hotter room, so some students took a test in a room that was 90 degrees, some people took a test in a normal room. If they were in that hot room, they had higher feelings of aggression and hostility to a stranger that they had to describe and rate after taking the test. In MLB games, more batters are hit by pitched balls when the temperature is above 90 degrees. And it's not just that, there's this connection between aggression and hot days because people are outside more. It's the heat that makes them more aggressive. For example, violent crimes are higher on hot days, but not non-violent crimes like burglaries. It's only the violent crimes that are more common when the weather gets hot. Another cause of aggression is rejection, exclusion, or taunting. Oh, my dog. For example, the Columbine killers felt rejected. And then they went and killed multiple of their classmates. You see this for a lot of, I'm going to take that away from my dog. You see that for a lot of mass shooters, people who are going to kill multiple people, like at schools or other events. Especially if it's at schools, it's usually someone who felt excluded, felt rejected by their peers. Obviously, that is in no way a justification for what happened, but it's a contributing factor to what caused them to go out and do that. The poisonous social atmosphere that you see in a lot of high schools in the country plays a part in what happens. Twenge and Baumeister did a study where they found that being rejected by your peers had a lot of negative effects, including a dramatic increase in aggressiveness. For this, students had to rate how much they wanted to work with fellow students, and some students were randomly told that no one wanted to work with them to elicit these feelings of rejection. The rejects expressed more intense hostility against the people who they thought had rejected them, as well as against neutral people when they were allowed to be aggressively. So if you feel rejected, you are more likely to be aggressive. Another factor is frustration. We have something called the frustration aggression principle. This says if an individual is thwarted on the way to a goal, the resulting frustration will increase the probability of an aggressive response. You are more likely to see this frustration leading to aggression if 4 factors are present. First, if the frustration, or if the goal is within reach. So if it is close. 2, expectations of reaching that goal were high. 3, the rule of fairness was violated. It doesn't seem fair the way it was blocked. And then 4, the goal is blocked without a compelling reason. Those are the 4 factors that are going to make it more likely you have aggression because of frustration. So let's go over a few experiments connected with this. For the Barker, Dembo, and Lewin experiment, kids had to stand outside a wire screen looking at a bunch of really great toys that were just out of reach. Again, goal close by, they can see those toys. After a really long time, they were allowed to go and play with the toys. There was a control group that didn't have to wait at all. They could immediately play with the toys. The kids who had to wait were significantly more likely to act in an aggressive way. So they're smashing toys, they're throwing them against walls, things like that, compared to that control group that didn't have to wait. For the Harris experiment, what they did was they had students cut in line, like at the movie theater, outside a restaurant, that sort of thing. And they either cut in front of the second person in line or the 12th person in line. If you are that second person in line, you are really close. You can see whatever it is you want, that restaurant, those movie tickets. If you're 12th, you know you've got a little bit of a wait. The person in line was more aggressive if they were closer, if they were that second person in line. Because remember, frustration tends to be high when the goal is just within reach, if it's within view when you are blocked. For the unexpected, illegitimate aspect of this, that is what the Kulik and Brown experiment looked at. And what they did was they got participants to call people to ask for donations for a charity. And they were told that about 2/3 of the people would give them a donation, that on average that's what the rate was, 2/3. The control group wasn't told anything. They just made the calls. No one gave them any money. No one donated to them. The group that thought that they were supposed to get a lot of responses, to get a lot of pledges, acted more aggressively. They spoke harsher on the phone. They were slamming it down after the person said no. And if the person on the phone gave a bogus reason for not giving any money, again, illegitimate blocking of the goal, then they were even more aggressive. Another related concept is relative deprivation. This is the deprivation we feel when we see others enjoying a better situation, or when we're deprived of something relative to our expectations. So it's not, this is what, it's you comparing yourself to others. That's the big thing with relative deprivation. It's not objective, it's subjective. What do they have? That's what I should have too. And so Bronson and DeWall did a famous experiment with this with monkeys, capuchin monkeys, where actually, first thing I will show you the video of it. So watch this video of the monkeys.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs, and with birds, and with chimpanzees. But with Sarah Brosnan, we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
So the monkey's totally fine with the cucumber until he sees that grapes are an option. When it's comparing himself to the other monkey and realizing he has less, that frustration led to that aggression, led to him being so angry. So relative deprivation can cause aggression. For DeSales and Norton, what they found was they looked at air rage incidents over several years from an international airline, and they found that the presence of a first-class cabin produced 4 times as many aggressive incidents among passengers in economy. Because you can compare yourself to the first-class people. You know they're up there in better seats. And so they were more likely to act aggressively on the flight. This was especially true if the economy passengers had to walk through first class in order to get to their smaller, worse seats in the back. As long as people live with hopes that are unsatisfied, they're going to feel frustration, and it's going to lead to aggression, basically. And the next thing to go over is social learning and aggression. So we will cover, I'm going to cover we'll cover all of this. This will be the longest video we'll have in this section. The final video we'll have in this series for this chapter will be shorter. But I want to cover all of the social learning stuff, which includes Bandura and his Bodal study at the end. So first, what is social cognition? The social cognitive learning theory says that people learn how to behave through cognitive processes such as their beliefs and perceptions of events and through observation and imitation of others. So in an experiment done by Malik and McCandless, what they did was that they frustrated third graders by having them miss out on a monetary prize because another kid was clumsy. If they were told that the kid was sleepy and upset after the fact, they were less aggressive against the kid. They could think it wasn't his fault. Their cognitions came into play. They acted less aggressively because it was an unintentional mistake by the kid. We're less likely to retaliate against someone who has provoked our anger when we hear a good excuse for their actions before they occur, more so than after the fact, like in that experiment. Aggressive stimuli also play a part. If an individual is angered or frustrated, the mere mention of a word or a name associated with what they're upset at, what provoked them, increases their aggression. So Berkowitz's experiment connected with this. What they did was participants were paired with a Confederate who they were told was either a college boxer or a speech major, and the Confederate made them mad. Half of the people from both of those groups viewed a prize-fighting scene from a movie afterwards, and half viewed an exciting but non-violent clip. I think it was a bike race. And after that, they were all allowed to shock the Confederate who had angered them if they wanted to. Those who saw the boxer movie gave a stronger and longer shock in general. They saw something aggressive, it made them more aggressive. But those who saw the boxer movie and were paired with the boxer delivered the most painful shocks. So that combination of being upset by a boxer, watching a boxing film, caused them to be the most violent. Another related concept is the weapons effect. This is the fact that the mere presence of an object associated with aggression can serve as a cue for an aggressive response. For the experiment connected with this, college students were insulted in a room in which there was either a rifle lying around in the corner, or for the control group, it was a neutral object. I think it was a badminton racket. After that, students could give an electric shock to a fellow student. The ones who were in the room with the aggressive stimulus, with the gun, gave more shocks than the people who had been in the room with the racket. Even though they never actually interacted with that gun, just seeing it made them more aggressive. Another thing that can increase aggression is de-individuation. De-individuation is a state of lessened self-awareness. Basically, it's the tendency for people to take less responsibility for themselves if they have this lack of self-awareness. If you don't have to take responsibility, that is going to increase aggression. If you know you're responsible for what you do, it inhibits aggression. If you are unidentifiable, so you're not responsible, aggression is going to go up. For Zimbardo's experiment connected with this, Women had to give electric shocks to other people, but they were allowed to decide how long the shocks were and how intense they were. Half of the time, the women were in a bright room and they wore name tags when they did it. Half of the time, they were in a darker room and they wore loose robes and hoods while they shocked the person. If they were in that darker room with the robe and the hood, they gave longer and more severe shocks. They didn't have to feel responsible. For this de-individuation, it reduces the concern about what other people will think about them. It weakens restraints against prohibited forms of behavior. You're going to act worse. For Mullen's research was on lynchings in the US. He looked at 60 lynchings that happened between 1899 and 1946. And what he found was that there was a correlation between how large the crowd was and how heinous the lynching was, how violent it was. The larger the crowd, the more horrific the acts were during the lynching. Because you are in this faceless mob, you are less self-aware, you're less mindful about what you're doing and the prohibitions against it, and so you're more willing to commit atrocious acts. This, by the way, this de-individuation is a big factor in online bullying. If you can hide behind a screen with a username that's not yours and a picture that's not your face, they don't know who you are. You're willing to say the kinds of things you would never say directly to someone's face. And so for the final thing we'll talk about with this video, we'll talk about Bandura and his Bobo doll study. For this, he was looking at, again, social learning. So learn by observing a model, repeating what they do. This connects with aggression as well, this imitation. Kids imitate what adults do. If adults are aggressive, the kids are going to imitate that aggression. And so his famous Bobo study looked at this connection between imitation and aggression. The adults' aggressive behavior served as an inspiration for the kids to not only copy the aggression they saw, but to think of novel ways to be aggressive as well. And so what I'm going to do right now is show you the video of Bandura and his famous Bobo doll study. So watch that now.
The segment you're about to see is taken from an early experiment on learning of aggressive styles of behavior through modeling. Children watched a filmed adult perform novel aggressive acts toward a inflated doll, and the physical aggression was accompanied by novel hostile remarks. We later measured how much of this modeled aggression the children had learned just by watching. Now, the measurement of learning of aggression uses simulated targets rather than live ones. For example, to test how well bombardiers have learned bombing strategies, you would use simulated targets rather than require them to bomb San Francisco or New York. The model pummeled the doll with a mallet, flung it in the air, kicked it repeatedly, threw it down and beat it. It was once widely believed that seeing others vent aggression would drain the viewer's aggressive drive. As you can see, exposure to aggressive modeling is hardly cathartic. Exposure to aggressive modeling increased attraction to guns, even though it was never modeled. Guns had less appeal to children who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling. The children also picked up the novel hostile language. The room contained varied play materials, and children could choose to play aggressively or non-aggressively. The children devised new ways of hitting the doll. Now, the object of interest was the novel aggressive acts, not punching the doll. And children in the control group who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling never exhibited the novel forms of aggression. And here's a creative embellishment. A doll becomes a weapon of assault.
And that is it for this video.